Good afternoon. Welcome to our webinar. Maybe we can wait for a while to let the participants gradually join. And I'm Colleen. Today we have Anson, and we will introduce the regulation updates of OEKO-TEX. In fact, this is the second quarter webinar in our series called OEKO-TEX Awareness Webinar Series. Because OEKO-TEX Association already announced the latest update in March. So today we would like to have a brief introduction of these regulations. Maybe while we waiting for more participants joining, let me introduce our company. We're TextTex AG. Our headquarters is in Switzerland, and we have different branches worldwide. Like Hong Kong office is the first branch of OEKO-TEX office in Asia. And we also have China, Shanghai, Beijing, Taiwan, Indonesia, Malaysia, etc. As you can see, there's a lot of branches in our slide. So if you have a supplier or a buyer that you need help, no matter for OEKO-TEX certification or for other textile and leather testing service, feel free to contact us. We will connect you with our local office to offer you the best service. We are actually celebrating 180 years anniversary because TextTex is a company with long history. So we are proud that to offer you excellent service for the industry. As the official representative of OEKO-TEX, every year we have the responsibility to tell the public that the changes of the regulation, and let us see the rundown for today. For the part one, we have navigating the new OEKO-TEX regulation update, which cover all regulation in general, which will effective from June. After that, in the part two, I will also focus on a very important rules of which is the change to upstream certification acceptance. So this is two parts of our webinar. The first part will hold by Anson, and then I will be responsible for the second part. After that, we will have a Q&A section. So during the webinar, if you have any question, please feel free to type on the Q&A box you can find in the Teams, and we will also answer you. Originally, we also have a Filipino language because we take care of clients from Philippines as well. But because we don't see significant registrations of Filipino webinars, so today we will just cancel it in this afternoon. If you need it in this language, please feel free to contact us. We will offer you another separate section for that. But I believe that English webinar would be should be also helpful to Philippine market.
Thank you, but I'm Filipino.
Thank you. Yeah, please leave me your name if you want that, because we need a little bit time to prepare that because we lead our colleagues for proofreading. Um, so, yeah, thank you for telling us that. Maybe we can go on to start the first part. Anson, last.
I'm Anson. Let's dive into the first part, newly added SVHCs. First, let's check the first item, DBDPE. This substance is common in plastic and rubber, used as a flame retardant and adhesive. The four major current standards all require a limit of 1,000 milligrams per kg. Note that ACPs containing this substance have already been removed from the ACP list. Current certificates won't be disqualified yet, but from June 2026, these products will not be able to apply for certificate renewal, so everyone needs to pay attention to this. Next, let's talk about reactive brown 51, a dual toxicity substance now under regulatory control. It is used mainly in some dyes and post-processing that we need to have extra concern. Applicants must declare that there is no intentional use of this harmful substance in their production, similar to navy blue. So you can also see in the table that the restriction is set as no intentional use. If you look further, the third item is N-hexane. This substance is commonly found in some industrial solvents, and you can also see it in some cleaning agents. Restriction settings vary. For the three major categories, Standard 100, Leather Standard, and Organic Cotton, the limit is 100 milligrams per kilogram. For Eco-Passport, it's 1,000 milligrams per kilometer. SVHC generally uses the 1,000 milligrams per kg threshold as a reference. But for OEKO-TEX, considering hazardous substance concentrations, they also hope to align volatile organic compound standards with others, hence the lower limit. Check out this Dechlorane Plus. It's a flame retardant common in electronics, building materials, and textiles. It's proven to accumulate in organisms, posing risks to ecosystems and human health. So in 2025, the EU have already included this substance in the list of prohibited chemical substances under PROPS. Now, OEKO-TEX has also included it in the RSL, and the maximum limit established within the scope of the four major product classes will be 1,000 milligrams per kg. Next, let's check the second part, covering newly added chemical restrictions and monitored substance changes. The first item is vinyl chloride, which is essentially PVC. Here, we mean the PVC monomer, a toxic gas. This year, a new test for volatile organic compounds was added. For limit requirements, it is 1 mg per kg across the three major certifications, while for OEKO-Passport, it is 10 mg per gram. As for acetophenonazine, this is also a newly added restricted volatile organic compound. It's quite common and is formed during the EVA foam manufacturing process. However, it has a certain skin sensitization effect, so it's also included in the restricted substances list with specific limitation requirements. All three major certification categories set the limit at 50 mg per kg, while for the OEKO-Passport, it's set at 500 mg per kg. Let's take a look at CS2. It's also a restricted bulk chemical compound, and its limit is set at 10 milligrams per kg. For the OEKO-Passport, the limit is set at 100 milligrams per kg. One thing to note is that a firm has already included these three types of substances in their restricted substances list. Alright, next, let's take a look at some of the restriction requirements for pesticides and insecticides. The first one is alphamethrin, which is an insecticide, and then there's the dichlorfluoride, which is a bactericide. Pentachloranisol is a pesticide, and triazophos is an insecticide. For these four substances in Standard 100, the limit is 0.5 milligrams per kilogram. For classes 2 to 4, it's 1 milligram per kilogram, and for OEKO-TEX organic cotton, the limit is 0.1 milligrams per kilogram. For the Eco Passport, it's set for non-intentional use. Lastly, let's take a look at some changes in substance monitoring and operational procedures. Starting from 2026, the following new substances will begin to be monitored, but there isn't any specific limit set yet. Just providing this information so you have a general idea. As for the substances listed below, after assessment, it was found that they have very low relevance to the textile and leather industries, so they will be removed from the observation list. Again, this is just for your information. Part 3 covers restriction changes and key updates. First, let's look at familiar chemicals like bisphenol. For bisphenol B, F, and S, limits for standard 100 and ECO Passport, organic cotton are now 200 milligrams per kg, aligning with the firm and leather standards. Bisphenol B is now 800 milligrams. Please note about that. In the leather standard, the limit for bisphenol S is also 800 milligrams per kg, with a 1-year transition period. Next, let's look at synthetic glitter. They must pass the color fastness test according to the latest standard. The requirement for standard 100, leather standard, and organic cotton are all changed from under observation to fast, which means testing is mandatory. This change specifically addresses microparticle contamination. Next, regarding p-anisodine related to carcinogens, the limit for organic cotton in standard 100 and leather standard updated from under observation to 20 milligrams per kilogram. For the Eco Passport, it's now 100 milligrams per kilogram. As for TPP, it's mostly used in consumer products as additive or retardant. In the 2018 leather standard, the organic cotton limit dropped from 1,000 to 500 milligrams per kilogram. Regarding PFAS, it was found that in 2025, a law was enacted to ban the use of these PFAS in cosmetics and textiles. You can also see the relevant limits in the legislation, that is, the specific limits for each PFAS. OEKO-TEX therefore has updates on the limits in relation to the relevant legislation. Currently, for the limits, the content of any targeted PFAS substance must be less than 25 ppb, and the total content of targeted PFAS substances must be less than 250 ppb. As for total fluorine, or TF, its content must be less than 50 ppm. So starting from June 2026, if the total fluorine content exceeds the limit, but it can be proven that the source of the fluorine is not from PFAS substances, in other words, if the target PFAS substances are compliant, then the customer can choose to proceed with A. PFAS GCMS testing, and this test is to confirm no high molecular compounds hinder degradation. If passed, and the applicant provides reliable production documents explaining the fluorine source, certification can be exempted. The certificate scope must state it contains fluorine from non-PFAS sources. So you can see. In the table, the column on the bottom is the only situations where you can apply for this exception. Here's a diagram to briefly introduce the structure of total fluorine. So, total fluorine, as the name suggests, is the total amount. Below, it will be further divided into organic fluorine and inorganic fluorine. We mainly focus on the organic fluorine, and among all organic fluorine, we have AOF and EOF, and what we need to find, generally speaking, are the target PFAS inside the red circle. But for certain other chemical substances, non-target PFAS, they also have the potential to transform into target PFAS, so this also needs to be carefully assessed. Currently, OEKO-TEX focus on the certification level can address the issue of total fluorine and some specific target PFAS, But for the more complex area regarding non-target PFAS, there aren't any testing methods available for under OEKO-TEX yet. However, TestX we now have a self-developed methodology that can effectively handle this demand. This method detects non-target PFAS. If you're interested in learning more, please contact our CSO for further information. We can provide the test data to all interested parties. However, I must clarify that this non-target PFAS test is not directly related to OEKO-TEX requirements, as explained earlier. The test results will not be used for application as a basis for certificate exemption. All right, now let's move on to the fourth part, which is about supply chain certification. Updated procedures and revised retesting conditions. Let me give a bit of background first. The EU is committed to preventing greenwashing practices and also wants to introduce regulations to enhance supply chain transparency. As a pioneer in supporting sustainable development, OEKO-TEX is currently actively improving its certification process to align with these regulations. One of the important improvements is the change in the recognition of upstream certificates. To enhance traceability within the internal system, applicants now need to submit upstream certificates from second-tier suppliers, which are like intermediaries, basically raw material certificates. This can only be used for the initial certification. In other words, when it comes to renewal, all raw material certificates must come directly from your certified suppliers. This will be implemented starting from June 2026. Let's have some examples to explain. In case 1, you can see that the middleman can be acting as an agent or a trader. They are not involved in any wet processing nor any chemical processing. They just hold some raw material certificates from their upstream suppliers, and they are not certificate holder themselves. Under the new rule, such handling can only be accepted in an initial application. To put it simple, during the transitional period between the years 2026 and 2027, we still accept upstream supplier certificates submitted by agents or traders, but it will be no longer acceptable in 2027. In 2027, any other situation, intermediaries must hold their own certificates, even for traders or middle agents. Let's take a look at the second example. In the diagram, you can see a tailoring factory and a processor, and they're not involved in any wet processing or chemical processing. But within the whole supply chain, they play an active role. So, in terms of resource management, they have a leading position. So, for this specific type of tailoring factory or processor, they must hold their own independent certificate. Just like in the previous example, it is only under 2 conditions, either when applying for a new certificate or during the official transition period, that this type of tailoring factory or processor can submit an upstream raw material certificate. Let's also take a look at the third example. As you can see in the diagram, the tailoring factory and the processor are not involved in any wet processing or chemical treatment. And within the whole supply chain, this time they don't play an active role, because all the resource application, management, and production collaboration are handled elsewhere. Then, in this case, the cut and sewn commission. Factory doesn't need the certificate. Here we just want to simplify the situation to help everyone understand the whole concept. In reality, supply chain complexity is diverse, especially in textile industries. There are also quite a lot of complex commission structures. So if anyone has questions, you're very welcome to ask us, and we'll be happy to help. Depending specifically on the unique situation of different clients, we can provide a detailed explanation of which layer or which supplier needs to apply for the certificate. Next, here's the second piece of rather important news. This time, the main focus is on the illegal handling or chemical processing by customer suppliers, especially in cases where they do not hold a valid certification. To begin with, I would like to first discuss the background. This time, the specific changes from OEKO-TEX mainly come from analytical reports which clearly demonstrate that if a company's supply chain includes any wet handling or chemical processing, but without certification, belongs to a critical risk indicators, meaning that most of them don't meet the requirements. Basically, in general, they often fail on different testing and are not up to standard. And one of the key reasons for this is such company has less transparency. However, since Europe implements strict supply chain regulations in 2026, these rules will also require products to disclose all sources and chemicals used. So because of this, they've also decided that all subcontractors and processors involved in wet processing and chemical treatment must obtain the standard 100 certification. That's because a lot of the time, these wet processing and chemical treatment subcontractors or processors can actually skip testing. So, yeah. So, because of this, they've been identified as the main group required to apply for their own specific certification this time. Basically, what this means is that now, the majority of individual products will go through testing as part of their own certification. We still need to carry out certification for those commission and processing factories that work for our clients. So for this update, starting from June 2026, it will require that, within the supply chain, any facility that has carried out enforcement processing or chemical processing procedures must have their products certified according to Standard 100. For renewal certification, there will be a 1-year transition period. This applies within 2026, and for products being certified at this time, there is a 1-year exemption. So, regarding this new regulation, those subcontracted processing factories that haven't been certified yet will have time to apply for their own certificates. Alright, regarding the new changes I just mentioned, I can share some insights with everyone. First of all, I think what everyone is most confused about is what exactly is wet processing. Is it just using water? The conclusion is, wet processing includes all production steps that use water to treat materials. For example, like washing, bleaching, finishing, and the wet processing steps. As for chemical processing, it mainly refers to production steps that involve the use of chemicals, such as dyeing, printing, laminating, coating, and finishing. According to these new regulations, these processes must be certified. Let's also take a look at some practical examples. In this example, there's Factory A, which holds a certificate for home textiles and is mainly responsible for the production stage, handling makeup or sewing procedures. Then there's Warehouse A and Factory B. Factory B is a dyeing factory, and both belong to the same group, with the same management and the same owner. So, they share the same address. So, in this case, does Factory B need to apply for a processing certificate? The conclusion is yes, any subcontracted procedures or outsourced processing that involve dyeing or chemical treatment must be certified, even if they are at the same address, belong to the same group, or are under the same company. Alright, let's look at another example. So, for Group A company, they hold a certification, and they're responsible for the production stage, which includes makeup and sewing up processes. This group has 3 subsidiaries. Company B provides some non-certified dyed fabrics and some garment washing processes. Company C is responsible for processing and printing, while Company D supplies some uncertified decorative ribbons. Companies A, B, C, and D all share the same address. In previous on-site inspections, their dyeing, printing, and some making up facilities have already been checked. So, do B and C both still need to apply for processing certificates? So, when it comes to processing work, both Company B and Company C must each apply for a processing certificate separately, because it involves some wet and chemical processing. For Company B, there pre-certified dyed and printed fabrics does not yet have the certificate because this particular product involves a dyeing process. And since they do not currently have the certificate yet, so this specific fabric supplier. So in this process, Company B also needs to have a product certificate to certify that the fabric supplied comes from this supplier. But Company D doesn't need to have its own certification because it's just A. It's not considered to be part of the main material. Like we mentioned earlier, this is mainly targeted at the main materials. So, all the examples above still can't fully break down the whole complex supply chain. If you want to know more, like which company needs a certificate, feel free to contact us. We can explain everything to you in detail. We also ask clients to pass the message to all those suppliers still in the process and their processors. During 2026 and 2027, we'll help them apply for their certificates. All right, then let's take a look at the latest arrangements for high-risk items that fail testing. This time, OEKO-TEX has specified that during the renewal process, if any high-risk items fail, the following procedures must be followed. The first step is that the client must provide an improved sample and an explanation of the improvement method for the improved sample. So, just like how most people typically handle retesting applications, you probably already know how to deal with it. The second step is a brand new procedure. For any non-compliant products, a second test must be formally conducted within 6 months after the certificate is issued. And the cost will be borne by the customer. If the product still fails the second test, then there are only 3 options left. The first option is that the product's grade may have to be adjusted according to your test results. Make changes according to the situation. The second possibility is to remove the affected products from the certification documentation. Of course, any dyes or chemicals used in those related products will also need to be removed. The third option, which is also the least ideal, is to revoke the entire certificate. So, what exactly are these so-called high-risk items? For example, there are heavy metals, including chromium-6, nickel, total lead, and total cadmium. There are also things like phthalates, flame retardants, and some other types of substances like ACP film retardants, as well as various other kinds of hazardous materials. I won't go into detail here. In fact, there's a chance that a formal list of high-risk substances will be released later on, so we can look at it again when the time comes. And we will send it out to different clients. The 2026 regulations reflect our commitment to safety and environmental responsibility. Important milestones taking effect in 2026 include the latest wet processing procedures, as well as certification requirements for Tier 2 suppliers. These 2 points should be the most closely related to everyone. That's right. Thank you all. If you have any questions, feel free to contact us. Now, I'll hand the time back to Colleen.